Hello and welcome. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Rob.
And together we are Antique Dust.
Dust.
Woohoo! And apologies, we are back for the final episode of Series 1 of Downton Abbey. We have had a little bit of a hiatus though, haven't we?
Well, life gets in the way sometimes.
Yes, we have been busy doing our wine exams, and that took up a lot of time, and then I've had lots of dental issues and things.
No one wants to know about your dental issues.
But it is now a rainy Sunday while we're recording this, and our chamomile lawn is getting drenched by Storm... Is it Anthony?
Something like that. Anthony?
Spelt with an I. So
Anthony with an I?
Street Anthony. So anyway, we have just watched the episode 7 of Series 1 of Downton Abbey. Oh my God, it was so full and jam-packed, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So it all opens. Lots of crucial events unfold, and the episode begins with the announcement of Cora Crawley's pregnancy. They've just come back from a season in London, and she is the joy of expecting a fourth child 18 years later after the last one. So I was like...
There's your start for 10 and no conferring.
So there's a lot of uncertainty where it comes to Mary, quite contrary,
yes, indeed.
Who has been doing the season in London, 4th time, and she said when she was returning from Downton, she would give Matthew her decision.
Yeah,
on
but
his
what
proposal.
if Matthew's now no longer the heir?
No.
What happens then?
So sort of the aunt, her aunt is sort of putting a spanner in the works for Mary, suggesting that potentially sort of marrying a lowly solicitor, country solicitor, wouldn't be the right thing to do.
But sadly, Mary's a bit of damaged goods, isn't she?
Well,
so that's not really the best advice from her aunt.
No, the aunt's aware of what's happened, and then we have a visitation at the London house from one of Mary's previous suitors, the chap that, or is it Mr. something or other?
Oh, here we go.
Sorry. Go on, help me out here, love.
Well, I don't have my notes, so I can't help you out with that.
So it becomes apparent that it wasn't him that put the spanner in the works with the Turkish embassy. It was actually Edith. Oh gosh, Edith. Well,
Yeah.
I think if Edith hadn't been goaded by Mary,
well, they're as bad as each other. They're as bad as each other. It's like the whole just a sister thing.
It's a sibling rival, but no, but Sybil.
Anyone who has had sisters, then that's just how it is with sisters sometimes.
Yeah, well, I've never had a sister, thank goodness. Well,
obviously,
pretty useless brother, but that's another story. So it's all sort of kicking off with regards to the sort of marriage proposal and what have you, and obviously with Cora being pregnant, there's a chance that it could be a boy. So therefore, Matthew and sort of posse is potentially no longer required and sort of abandoned by the sidelines, which is sort of like I imagine that would be quite tough when you've been tempted with everything. It's like saying you've won the lottery. Oh no,
sorry,
no,
we
you
made
haven't.
a mistake.
We've made a mistake. No, you haven't. You've got the tombola prize of some sort of Lily of the Valley talc. And there's also a little bit of a problem with the Dowager, her lady's maid.
Yes. So
her lady's
want
maid.
to say more?
Her lady's maid is abandoning her. It's so inconvenient. She's getting married. How could she do that?
How can
Dowager?
how can staff
have a life?
Have a life. I mean, really, do they not realise that that's not what's expected of them?
Exactly. I know, exactly. It's the same thing. So when I have my staff and team and that sort of thing, it's like, how dare you get another job elsewhere? That is really inconvenient.
Yes, I know. But then we discover that there's zero meaningful communication between Cora and
O'Brien, because O'Brien gets there's a sniff that they're putting an advert in for a lady's maid.
So O'Brien, O'Brien overhears lots of conversations about new ladies' maids and all the rest of it. And since there seems to be, as I said, zero effective communication between Cora and O'Brien, she immediately grabs the wrong end of the stick and thinks that she's being sacked.
Well, they're replacing her and then to get rid of her, which is, I mean, in fairness, Cora should have actually thought and said, right, okay, O'Brien's been my lady's maid for 10 years. She knows a lot of people, a lot of other ladies' maids, so she may be able to find someone that can having a recommendation.
That's what a normal person would do. But no, not for the aristocracy. Let's not do anything like that.
Well, they are all a little bit clueless, aren't they? I mean, I do love the Downton family. I think they're very, very fabulous. But the sort of the staff they pick up on the nuance a little bit more. So they're a bit more streetwise in the respect of their security is based on the family, so therefore they're always looking out for themselves as the respect of like, how will this affect me? Whereas the family are sort of a little bit. I think the word entitled. Well, they did have titles though, didn't they? So they were entitled.
Well, they were. Yeah, titled, I guess, but you know, it's such a different world. You know, when your job really is so dependent, but not just, you know, when we're talking about this period of time, it's not just your job; it's your whole world. That is essentially dependent upon
this family.
This family, because you can be dismissed at a moment's notice, and if you don't get a good reference, then your job prospects are gone.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
a very tenuous life.
But then again, I think a lot of people looked at it as a job for life, wasn't it? Really. So
for many people, it was a job for life.
You entered service, and then
you stayed with the same family your entire working life, and then hopefully they would see you right in your retirement.
So it's a little bit. And they also mentioned, because obviously the staff find out about Cora's pregnancy, and they're all very, shall I knit some booties? And Thomas is actually quite gruff about it and said, well, look. But he was actually matter of fact. And in fact,
Thomas is quite modern about it.
Yeah,
you know, he's not grovelly and kowtowing and all the rest of it. And you know, and I think he has a valid point when he says, "Why would we spend our money buying gifts for people who are much wealthier than?" And you know, maybe he's got a. He has got
a point, and obviously that speaking out is very, very much sort of.
Well, it's not the done thing. It's not the done thing.
So but I thought, I quite like Thomas because obviously I know his story arc, but for this series, so the first series, it was a nasty piece of work. Him and O'Brien were really horrible people, but they were actually speaking the truth.
Yeah.
So O'Brien thinks she's going to be replaced, and then she acts out with Cora. Cora's having a bath, and she hears. She goes in to say the bathroom run, and the Dowager's there, and they're discussing
the new lady's maid.
The new lady's maid, and O'Brien overhears this. And is obviously a little bit upset, and so then the next scene we have is with Cora in the bathtub, and she's bathing herself. A very nice bath, actually, sort of very, very lovely. No modesty windows at that bathroom, but I suppose you're not overlooked, are you?
Well, no, I mean, who's going to be peeking in your window?
They haven't constructed a block of council flats.
Not yet. Not yet,
anyway. Peering down. And she drops her soap, and the soap bar breaks in two. So sort of O'Brien picks up part of the soap and then says all the other parts under the bath, and gives her the soap, and then pushes it with a foot so it's sort of within whatever. So when Cora can come out, then it might cause a slip hazard. And she goes back into the room, and then she looks at a reflection in the mirror, and I thought it was really well played. She said, "You are not this person," and calls out, but it calls out too late.
And whoops.
Yeah, so... And she's no longer pregnant.
Yes.
And it becomes apparent that it was a boy.
Yes.
And that's very, very sad.
Poignant.
It's poignant and sad. And again, it puts the whole family in jeopardy. Again, with regards to the wealth and what have you. And again, Thomas speaks his truth when the staff downstairs are sort of waxing and feeling mourning. So look, they don't even know our names. Some of them don't even know your names. But he was a bit malicious along with that, and there's a bit of a punch up. So, well,
because he's rather unpleasant to William about the death of his mother.
Yeah. So it's very very poignant, and Carson actually sort of, although the punch was thrown at Thomas, he pats the person who threw the punch on the shoulder. So there's like assurance that he's done something that he wanted to do, but obviously he was restrained enough not to. So that was quite interesting. The whole Thomas dynamic, because obviously Thomas, there's war brewing because of the Duke of something or other in Austria.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Yes.
Yeah, your grasp of history is astonishing.
Yeah. So this is the start of World War One with sort of the assassination of said Duke, and everyone knows something's brewing. So Thomas is looking out for himself. So he wants to go into the medical corps.
So he doesn't have to fight.
He doesn't have to go in the trenches and doesn't have to put his own body on the line. So while the doctor's around, the doctor puts a recommendation forward, so which saves a lot of hassle, because obviously the sort of they're looking to get rid of him, because it's a bit of a nasty piece of work. He's stirred the pot where it comes to Mr. Bates, and it's just it's an awkward situation. So. But it's very interesting scenes with Thomas and O'Brien, and yeah, so it was very, very interesting. So that storyline aspect was very, very good, and so we've got this story which has got a little bit of amusement with this Mrs. Patmore, because Mrs. Patmore is sort of, her cataracts has caused various hijinks in the kitchen where she's tried to.
Well, yeah, I mean she's really been bullying poor Daisy to try to compensate or shift the blame for her failing eyesight onto Daisy.
So so basically they have sent her down to London to get her eyes tested.
Along with Anna.
So Anna goes along with Mrs. Patmore, and she goes in for her operation, and it's all being paid for by Downton, and it's a bit of unease for Mrs. Patmore, because the cook from Matthew's cook comes up to look after it, and there's a bit of a standoff and a comedic version. I can't remember the name of the cook.
Mrs. Bird. As in Tweety Pie, the bird.
So Mrs. Bird is a very formidable lady, very northern, and very
no nonsense,
very incredibly no nonsense. And Mrs. Patmore sort of persuades Daisy to make her food not taste as nice. And there's a scene where she's sort of grating some soap into the soup. Which she thinks the soup is for the upstairs, but actually, sort of Mrs. Bird has sort of wandered.
Yes.
So I think she could see a few steps ahead. So again, another formidable lady, and it's actually the staff food, and
it's inedible.
It's
rendered inedible by Daisy.
Yes, but Mrs. Bird, rather than sort of attacking her, just said, "Look, you've done."
Yeah, she essentially comforts her, and but she recognises that she's trying to be loyal to Mrs. Patmore.
Yeah, and they basically have the meat stew, the beef stew, which sounds much nicer than soup with soap. And there was also a very lovely scene when Mrs. Patmore comes back, and they're planning for the garden party. And obviously Mrs. Patmore and Mrs. Bird have been sort of standoffish against each other. And Mrs.
Hughes.
Mrs. Hughes. Yes, you're working with this. You remember the names. There's a big
well,
cast.
one of us has to.
Yeah. So I should be, if I was on the stage, prompt. So Mrs. Hughes is there saying, "Well, I made the orders," and Mrs. Bird says, "I have never known that we don't have sort of carte blanche with stock cupboard. We should be making the orders because we're actually cooking it." And it's sort of, they have Mrs. Patmore and Mrs. Bird have an allegiance there.
Yes, they have a bonding moment over putting Mrs. Hughes in her place.
Mrs. Hughes like sort of goes away. So I thought that was really. There was some really, really good comedic. They balanced this episode with some really good comedy, and I thought that was that was really to make me titter. So moving on to the Mr. Bates situation. Mr. Bates was obviously set up by Mrs. O'Brien and Thomas for Thomas stealing wine and then various things going missing and blah blah blah.
So they've decided to get rid of Mr. Bates once and for all.
Yeah, Mrs. O'Brien's lady's maids found some dirt on Mr. Bates, saying that he was in prison for thieving some silver. And Mr. Bates is saying nothing, and Carson is wanting to give him a chance. So the the head of Downton. Okay, Lord Grantham. Thank you. Wow, dear listeners, Rob obviously needs a couple more cups of coffee.
No. Hang on a minute. No, Rob is not anticipating that after a relatively short hiatus away from doing the podcast that you have completely forgotten the name of every single character.
Well, I didn't get my top trumps, did I? So
well, that's not my fault.
So Lord Grantham wants to give Mr. Bates a chance, but Mr. Bates isn't saying anything. He's keeping mum. And while Anna is in London, she goes sniffing around. So she goes to the barracks, tries to find under the auspice that she's a cousin looking to get in contact.
Yeah. And she's looking for information.
And the barracks chap sort of says, "I don't know where his wife is, but or his address, but here's his mother's address."
Yeah. But crucially, he also says or comments on what a strange business the whole theft was. So that sets a seed for Anna to dig at.
Yeah. So she goes along and sees the mother, and the mother says this sort of the evil
Vera.
Such a vindictive name. Vera.
Apologies to any Veras who might be listening to this.
We love Veras that listen to our podcast. Other Veras that don't listen to our podcast, ooh, evil.
We don't like them because they're all nasty bits of work, apparently.
Clutching pearls, as we speak. And basically, it becomes apparent that Mr. Bates was a little bit of a drunk. He didn't hit or anything like that, but he was a bit rude and horrible. And because of that, and because he had
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, so
that's not what they called it then, but that's what it is.
And so he sought solace in booze, and Vera stole the silver, and he took the flak for it, and that's why he was released out of prison early. So, but Mr. Bates doesn't want to tarnish his wife's or his ex-wife's name, which is, I suppose it's honourable in a way. Maybe he just feels that he was so horrible that he pushed her to do it, but who knows?
His motivation isn't really clear at this point as to why he was so protective of his wife.
Yeah. So, and yeah, so you just feel like so Anna then sort of after sort of finding out this information, then rather than tell Carson, goes to Lord Grantham and tells him, and basically that's puts pay to.
Interestingly, she didn't tell Mr. Bates either.
No, which is peculiar. But I suppose Mr. Bates wouldn't want tittle tattle.
Yeah.
So she knows exactly where the audience has to go straight to that. So you can understand her motives. And there was a really nice touching scene at the garden party where Mr. Bates is talking to the Dowager's butler and basically stating that I say the Dowager's butler. I think it was the Dowager's butler, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, you'll get
Yes.
blank. Yeah,
Yes.
the Dowager's butler was asking to put his hat in the ring with regards to Anna. She says, "Oh, is there a chap in her life?" And sort of Mr. Bates says, "Yes, but he's very reserved." But so it puts a little bit of pay. It sets the scene that he does like her, he does respect her, and I think he does want more, which is really. There was quite a lot of romance in this one. Speaking back to romance, we had Edith.
Oh dear.
Edith goes out for a drive with, and you can give the name,
Anthony Strallan.
Anthony Strallan, and he preempts her also off screen, so she's regaling this story to Cora, that he is going to ask her a question at the garden party. And so that could potentially be marriage, and she's.
Well, what else would it be?
Yeah, it's like come and look at my petunias.
Yeah,
I'd like to
come up to my room to see my etchings. It's not going to be that, is it?
So Edith is getting really quite excited, but then it all becomes a pat. Then not Cora.
So Mary now knows about Edith, and they have a bit of a tense conversation.
Yeah,
about what Edith did.
And then Mary just
gets her revenge.
Gets her revenge by speaking to Anthony and basically saying, "Oh, she's avoiding some old duffer. I don't know who it is. He's going to ask her a question or something like that." And basically, sort of smothers that flame of passion.
Yes. Yeah. So she makes out that Edith has been mocking him.
Yes. And then he leaves and doesn't ask the question. So Edith is left bereft.
Yes.
Mary is also left bereft.
Well, before Mary's bereft, she's smug and lets Edith know just by a little tilt of her glass that she's the one responsible for Strallan's sudden departure.
Yeah.
But then she gets her comeuppance
with Matthew. Because so
it's also dramatic.
It's also drama. But I mean, the thing is, she's doing it for duty rather than love. But there is a connection there, and you can tell there is a connection there. So, that was kind of it was very comeuppance. But Mr. Carson, he consoles her, which is quite sort of like, I thought that was there was a scene underneath the trees with the lovely scenery in the background. And sort of he holds her into him, which is quite sort of unlike Carson.
Well, we do know, or at least we will subsequently learn that Carson and Lady Mary have known each other for her entire life, and they do have a closeness, and nothing untoward.
No, so we do cover sort of. So I thought that was really quite touching. So ultimately, the upstairs family, the Granthams, not a lot is going their way. They've lost.
Well, I don't know. They've had a telephone installed.
They've had 2 telephones installed, haven't they?
That's
One
a
downstairs.
nice touch.
There was again more comedic things. The Carson pretending to answer the telephone and going straight through to the operator.
Yeah, so the operator heard his pretend answer is and eventually asked, "What the heck are you doing?"
And so in the meantime, with the telephone engineer coming round, Sybil hears that they're looking for a secretary and gets Gwen to put an application in, and she follows it up and said, "Well, you didn't have any experience," and sort of Sybil says, "Well, she works here," and the guy, the telephone engineer, said, "Well, my mother was a housemaid. I've got a lot of respect for that because she didn't put any experience down. She
didn't say anything about what she does."
So they have an interview in the library. Sort of, Lord Grantham's not allowed to go in. And so,
his own library.
So you're telling me the telephone engineer is having an interview with my housemaid for a job
in my own library.
in my own library.
And I'm not allowed to go in.
So, which was like, oh, bless. And the first telephone call that was made was the telephone engineer phoning in, and the driver, sort of a chauffeur, sort of picks up the call and gives the good news to Sybil, and Sybil gives the good news to Gwen, and they're all hugging and what have you, and it's all like, oh yay! And Gwen's going on to be a secretary stroke legal eagle in the spin-off to
The Good Fight.
The Good Fight. She was in the first 3 series of that, wasn't she?
Yeah. And Game of Thrones. Don't forget Game of Thrones.
But did she do Game of Thrones as well? I've never watched Game of Thrones. It's too bloody for me. So, no. And Mrs. O'Brien, not Mrs. O'Brien, Mrs. Hughes?
The housekeeper?
The housekeeper.
Mrs. Hughes.
Sort of eyes up the chauffeur and says, watch what you're doing there. You don't want to break your heart.
He's very chummy. He's very chummy with Sybil.
Say, you don't want to lose your job and you break your heart.
Yeah.
And he says, what do you mean? And she just leaves it as that. So
Word to the wise.
Yes. So
a nod's as good as a wink to a blind horse or whatever.
So, and a lot happens at that garden party as well, with the respect of a telegram arrived and that war has been declared, but also Thomas has also handed his notice in to Carson. So I will, dear listeners, we will get
You've
this
been
right.
saying that for a whole series.
I will be training Rob to jump in sort of readily with names
even better, you could use the extensive list of cast.
I know,
and
but
characters.
you've printed it so low. I need to put a bifocus. I feel like hinge and brackets.
Printed it so low.
so it's a tiny font. So war has been declared. Matthew is declaring that he's not going to be marrying and wants to marry for love, and Mary isn't sort of declaring undying love. It's more duty. And it's all kicking off. So I love this episode. It really is. There was so much in it.
There was a lot.
There?
There was a lot in it. We covered a lot of ground. We learnt a lot. There's that whole pregnancy thing. Just like was one episode. It was quite compact.
But again, it's another one of these episodes where the entire summer has gone by.
Yeah.
I don't know what length of time this is all meant to be in for this series, because it must be 2 years.
Well, we're now in September 1914.
So when did the Titanic go down?
April 1912.
So it is 2 years
since the Titanic sunk. Yeah,
because it starts off with the Titanic sinking. So it covers a 2-year window. So quite a lot happens. So Lady Mary still hasn't got married. Gosh, she's very finicky, isn't she? So, but yeah, I absolutely adore it, and I'm looking forward to starting series 2 with better prompts for names and what have you.
Or perhaps by better remembering the names of
a little bit rusty, dear listeners. So I've also joined the Downton.
Oh Lord!
Yeah, there's a Downton Facebook group.
There's a Downton Facebook group. Maybe they'll help you remember the names of the characters. Yeah. They can provide the prompts.
There's actually 2 or 3 of them, and in one of them they have Matthew Picture of the Day. So someone's a little bit obsessed.
Right, okay.
And there's one lady on there that she has watched the entire series 36 times.
Well, she probably remembers the names of the characters then.
Do you think? Maybe we should reach out.
Yeah, I think you probably should. Yeah, you could do the podcast with her. She'd probably be much more informative.
So I could just make insightful comments on that.
Yeah.
So anyway, dear listeners,
that'd make a nice change.
So, dear listeners, we do apologise for our.
We'd quite like to apologise.
We'd quite like to apologise. That was episode 7, series 1. We will be cracking back on a more regular podcast times.
Yeah, it'll be more regular because Daisy's put syrup of figs in the soup.
Well, no, she didn't. She was thinking about putting syrup of figs to keep it regular. This episode I think it's for older series. Everything that's happened in this episode would have actually happened over a series.
Yeah,
so they did.
Pretty much.
They did. Julian Fellows did really, really well.
Well, it's a modern style of writing drama. We don't have you don't have the attention span really to put up with a 16 episode series that covers a week in the life of the Grantham family. In this week's episode, Lady Mary stubs her toe.
So anyway, dear listeners, apologies for the delay in coming back. We will be back more regularly, once a week, with the series 2 of Downton. We have got lots of delicious things to happen. I'm actually really looking forward to the prequel, which is The Gilded Age. I know it's not been Julian Fellows.
It's not a prequel.
Well, I think
it's not a prequel.
There is a sniff that
we don't even know if it's in the same universe.
I think it is in the same universe, and there is talk that the series 2 of The Gilded Age will have the Dowager.
So who's talking about that then?
That's in the Downton groups. Not the one which has like Matthew Picture of the Day.
well, all I can say is that Julian Fellows has ruled out that happening.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds like wishful thinking on the part of
he's got to do something.
The Downton Facebook group.
But there is going to apparently there is word on the street that they're looking to do a series 7 of Downton. And they're looking to get the cast together. But Lord Grantham...
Well, it sounds like a money grab to me.
It does. Well, the second film was definitely a money grab. That was more of a fan...
That was fan service
rather
than anything else. Let's
what happens? Oh, not much.
Our apologies to the Downton Facebook group, but it was sheer fan service.
The film. We will cover the film when we finish the full 6 series. But
Lord.
Anyway, dear listeners, this is Jonathan signing off.
And this is Rob saying goodbye.
Bye-bye. Find us all social media platforms. Like, subscribe, share, and...
surprise share.
Surprise us and share. Woo! And we're all social media platforms at Antique Dust. Anyway, dear listeners, farewell from me, Jonathan.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.